Welcome back to another episode of the Published and Paid podcast. This week's episode is really near and dear to my heart because I get to interview and speak to one of my favorite clients and one of my favorite people that I've had the opportunity to meet and work with over the past several years. So we want to welcome Dr. Ramon Goings to the stage, to the podcast, and he
Thank
is the author of 14 Secrets to a Done Dissertation. Dr. Ramon,
you.
welcome, welcome.
Thanks so much, Jasmine. I appreciate you as always for the invitation.
Of course, of course. So, Dr. Ramon and I, we had the opportunity to work together. And I always felt like your story was extremely interesting because not only were you very skilled, I mean, you have the highest education that you can possibly
Right.
attain, the entire world, but you were also a published author. So you had published academic books previously, correct?
Yeah, so I'm a college professor, and so part of the job of being a professor, you got to research and publish. And so prior to working with you, I had done I think maybe 4 or 5 academic books related to my research. And so yeah, I started there, but I knew I wanted to do something very different.
So what was that process like? Like, because oftentimes people have questions about, whether you should go the traditional publishing route or the self-published route. And so you had gone through an academic press before.
Yeah.
So what was that like for you?
Yeah, so the reason why I initially had to go through the academic press is that, as a faculty member, when you're trying to get tenure and promotion, all those things matter. You have to go through the academic press. That's just kind of like the how things go in higher education. So I did that for a job requirement, but when I was doing that, I wasn't making any money off the book sales. Like I still to this day probably have not made. I've made maybe $1,000 off of book sales, like nothing remotely close to what I wanted to do. And so it got to a point when I was thinking about writing 14 Secrets. I was like, I need to do a book, but I want to have control over it and I want to actually make money and be able to generate other income from the book.
Awesome. So like when you wrote your first book or when you wrote for the academic
Yeah.
press, were you primarily having your students to purchase those books as part of the required reading?
Yeah, so I didn't necessarily do it for my students, but sometimes like I would do other professors would use the book in their classes. They were teaching something similar to what we were writing about in those books. So a lot of times it would be for other faculty members to use in their classes, and also for students who are doing research in my area. I focus on Black male students in HBCUs. So if you're doing work in that area, you might purchase the book just to help like supplement your research.
Okay, okay, great. And so after a while, you said you decided to go the self-publishing route. Now,
Yeah.
I find this very interesting because sometimes people feel like traditional publishing makes you more credible or sets you up to make more money. But you wanted to learn how to self-publish your own book so that you could have a different experience.
Yeah, that and of course I wanted to make money, but I wanted ownership. So like my background's in music, and so before I became a college professor and even a K-12 teacher, I was going into the music industry, and so I knew how the independent route worked as a producer. Like you can make a lot of money by owning outright like your masters and things like that. So I thought I'll just apply the same thing to the book side, and if I own it, then I have more leverage on the product and what happens with it. So yeah, I didn't get caught up in like the academic publisher as a way to help my credibility, because I actually had credibility already in my field through writing for peer-reviewed journal articles. So I had myself established in a different way, so I didn't need that validation in ways some people might think they do.
Yeah, that's good. That's good. And so, how was the self-publishing process different for you?
Yeah, going into the self-publishing process, I knew nothing about it. So all I knew was the academic side. So being, it's when you do the academic or traditional publisher, once you write the product, you're pretty hands off after that point. And so they deal with the formatting, they deal with the copy editing, all that stuff. You just approve things, but you don't do it. On the self-publishing side, I was like, I'm in control of all this stuff. I got to figure out the process. And that's initially how I happened to find you. I'm like, all right, I got to start research. I'm a researcher, so I'm gonna start figuring out, all right, what's the process like to self-publish? What are the things I should do? What shouldn't I do? And I just happened one day to come across a podcast you did on social proof, and that's how I found you. Started to figure out, is this the route I want to go? And you became the person that kind of guided me in that direction.
Yeah, and I remember our first conversation too. I think, yeah, because you set up a call. You
Yep.
told me that you'd seen me on the podcast,
Yep.
which was wild because that was like in the middle of the pandemic.
Yes.
And
Yep.
so and and you told me to see me on the podcast. And then when we talked about the investment, you were like, you know what? I'm good on that.
Yeah, I just had the bad mindset. I was like, I didn't think about how I could recoup. I was just thinking about what the cost was. But as I always mention, like, sometimes God has a way of saying, boy, go do what you're supposed to do anyway. And so, like, right after we ended the call, I said, no, I'm not going to join. I'll figure it out, or I'll get my money together. Even though I had it, like, it wasn't an issue. I was making money in my business, but I was like, I don't know if this is the right fit. And then right after that, I literally got a email that said I got like a contract that exceeded the amount of your program at the time. And so I was like, yeah, that's the sign. Let me go ahead back and join.
I like that you were honest about that though, because to be like, I feel like a lot of people have that mindset of, you
Yeah.
know what, I'm not paying that.
Yeah.
Let me just go figure this out.
Yeah.
I'm smart. I can do this. How do you? And so I know that you circled back around a few days later.
Yeah.
I believe you paid in full, and then you came into the Author Made Easy boot camp at
Yeah.
the time. And I always felt like your journey was very unique because you had so much going on
I
at the
did.
time. And you had a lot of things going on to the point where some people might say it's too much going on right now. I'm not going to do it. With everything that you had going on, what made you decide to still move forward?
One, I had paid, right? So now I done coughed up the money, so I gotta recoup this thing. So I'm now, if I invest now, anytime I invest in something, I'm gonna be the top student or whatever I need to do to get recoup my money, but then also get the information and do that. So that was important to me. But yeah, at the time, I just to give y'all perspective, I had uh transitioned from one university to another. So I got a new job. We moved into a new house, all within 2 month time frame. So like July, August of 2020, all these things happened at one time. And so, in addition to joining the program, I think I joined the program in July of 2020. I got the new job in 2020 in July, and we moved in August of 2020. So all that happened in a month, and it was stressful for a minute. But I was like, I gotta hurry up and write this book because I need to recoup my investment on this program, and so that was important to me.
And so you have a background in education. So you are not a novice to curriculum. You're not a novice to programs or any of those things. Like you had programs of your own.
Yeah.
But tell me about your experience with going through the Author Made Easy boot camp and writing your book.
Yeah, the Ultimate Easy Bootcamp gave me just a framework of how to put the book together. Like I could write it, and I could have came to that conclusion. It would took me a lot longer. It's just the structure helped me kind of formulate my thoughts and really, outline and develop the chapters so that when I actually went to, first kind of dictate my book and like go through that process that you kind of put folks through, it was easier to do it than what I would have done on my own. And even how I approach writing like academic work, I usually sit and type versus like, another way to do it. And so, that was really helpful for me to just have that process from start to finish, but not just writing, but then how do you take what you wrote and then be able to market and sell it? I think that was another component that was really important to me because in higher education, they don't teach you nothing about sales or marketing your own books. You just, oh, I put out a post. I'm excited to say I have this new article. And then people just leave it there. But there's so much more that you can be done. And I learned that all in the program.
Awesome. And so I remember how long did it take you? How long did it take you to write your book? Because for like 3 months you didn't do anything
Yeah,
because you
3
had
months.
all this going on.
I joined in July, and then a friend of ours they were getting married, and my wife had to go to the rehearsal for the wedding, and it was like a 3-hour gap. And I literally wrote the book and the initial draft. So of course I did multiple edits after, but the initial draft of the book was written in like those 2 or 3 hours that I was sitting in a hotel room in Richmond, Virginia, waiting for my wife to come back from wedding rehearsal.
Now 3 hours to write a book.
Yeah.
Did you ever feel like this was too easy? This process went too quickly. This book can't be quality. It's supposed to be more difficult. Like, did you ever have those thoughts or doubts in your head?
Yeah, because a little bit, because in my space, a lot of times you think of books, you think about these old thick books and all this stuff. But when I realized, and I'm glad I wrote it this way, I started to think about doctoral students, who's my audience. They don't got a lot of time to read a long book because they got their own reading to do for their dissertation. So actually, I needed something that actually was short, sweet, and to the point, and written like a conversation versus it being written like an academic book. And so it became so much better to do it this way. In the book, so I have a copy. It's very short, sweet, to the point, cover to cover is like 80 pages. You can get through it. Most people say they get through it in like 1 or 2 sittings. Oh yeah, that's right.
Yeah, it's on the wall.
In the backdrop. Yeah, and I'm glad I did it that way. So no, I had those thoughts, but I definitely quickly got over those.
Yeah, I've heard of people saying that before. Like I've been, you were in the online
Yeah,
space, and I've seen people write posts, like other coaches or consultants who will plant seeds of doubt in people's minds, and they'll say, "Oh, any book that's written quickly isn't valuable. You need to take time. You need to do this. You need to do that." And I always say, no, it doesn't. Just because it takes you a long time to write a book doesn't mean that it's quality. It doesn't mean that it will read well.
yeah,
It doesn't mean that it's going to be structured well. Doesn't mean it's going to help anybody get results.
yeah,
Because I've seen long books just regurgitate the same information over and over and over again, and then you're skipping through half of it. But with the right strategy and structure, you can make magic happen. So, what happened when you wrote your book? You went through the self-publishing process, and one of the key things that you said was that you learned how to market
yeah.
your book. So, when you started doing those things, like what were your results?
Yeah, so one of the first thing I would say, I just follow Jasmine's process, right? And so I'm not the one to, if you're gonna give me something, I'm gonna at least use it, then I'll tweak it later if I need to for what I'm doing. But I just use the things you gave the whole process. Like, all right, here's the captions you need to put together, relate it, and you just make it tailored to your book. So I just followed the process. So I think it was like a month blitz type of thing to start pre-selling the book. And so, I think I started pre-selling on Thanksgiving. The book was going to come out in February of 21. So I started like November of 2020 marketing. And so by the time the book came out in February, I think first month we sold like 200 copies first month and maybe another 100 the second month. And then subsequently years now, we're approaching 2,000 copies sold of the
Wow.
book. Yeah.
Congratulations.
Yeah, so it went fast. I didn't realize that, once you start to put it out there, then people are, even if they don't buy it, like, oh, I know somebody who writes that book. And so now I get these people sending, other people to us because I have a book, related to this particular specific thing on writing your dissertation.
So, did you focus on individual book sales, or did you focus on like bulk book sales, or both?
So when I first started, I was focused on individual sales, just because that's what I knew. But then because, what ends up happening with the book is that a couple universities adopted it as their program text for their doctoral program. So now it went from one of the first universities that did this, they ended up buying 90 copies of the book at once for all their students who were starting in their doc program. And so it's gone from there. So most of my sales now on 14 Secrets are actually bulk sales. So for instance, one university I went to last semester, they bought 200 copies for their graduate students. So like now I'm selling in bulk like that. I don't really sell unless it's on Amazon. I really don't sell a lot of just one-on-ones, sales anymore. It's a better way to do it through bulk books.
You know what? And I'm so glad that you shared that, because that is one of the benefits of having a book that you've written, that showcases your expertise, that showcases your skill set and your knowledge. Because now you're not just having individuals, you can have schools, organizations, or whatnot buy numerous books all at once.
Yeah.
So I have a few more questions for you, because one of the things you said was that most of your sales now come through book sales and bulk sales.
Yeah.
So do those sales come through referrals? Are you pitching, different universities? Like, what's that process like for you? Because I know that we have a lot of listeners in our audience who, are in education,
Mm-hmm.
and they want to figure out, how can I sell my book in bulk?
Yeah, one of the things too, on one of your previous episodes of the podcast, folks should go check it out. You talk about how to do this, right, on the bulk book sales. Like I was
I
listening to
do.
like the process. She lays it out there, so you can go there. But I'm going to show you, kind of talk about what I typically will do. Is like if a university will bring me in to do, let's say, a workshop or a speech, or even if it's virtual. So this is virtual or in person, either route. The way I put the proposal, as you suggested on the episode, that's what I'm saying is right. The blueprint's right there. Is that initially I will, of course, say what's the fee for speaking or whatever the workshop is, but then I also will have another component where if you want to buy books, we'll have bands of books that you can buy at a certain price point depending on how many. So if you want to buy 10 or fewer, this cost. We go to 10 to 50 is this cost, 50 to 99 is this cost, 100 or more. And we have bands that folks can buy the books. So typically when I go to do a speech these days, I'm at least selling at the low end 10 copies at the lowest end, but typically we get to 40, 50, 100 copies at a time. It's universities or whoever your organization is want that because they want something to be able to give to a person. And then another kind of tip in Jasmine, I can't remember if you talked about in that episode or not, that sometimes in lieu of a speaking fee, I have to say, hey, you have to buy X number of books. Because think about it, it's no more money or no more time you have to spend to generate these books. You just got to get them printed. And so sometimes, I might say, well, and I'll waive my fee, but if you buy 200 copies or 300 copies of the book. And so there's ways you can get creative because especially in ed organizations, that book budget line item is different than a speaking line item in the budget. And then also for book orders, sometimes they can pay direct to you through a credit card versus having to go through their whole vendor process and then getting your stuff, into their systems. And so sometimes the books are easier for the university. Sometimes it makes it just easier for them to do what they need to do.
Listen, so all of you all listening to this and you train, you speak, he just gave you some gems on a easier way for you to get paid.
We could be creative as long as the money, the number just needs to add up. However we get to it is how we get to it,
Right. And I think that people tend to forget that, like, money is money and we're going to collect all of it. So
and then I think where you teach, in terms of how you structure the book becomes a lead magnet, right? So it's not just about selling the book. It's now because if I do the book the right way, it's going to bring me business too. So like the book is one thing, but the business on the back end of it is way more.
Yes. And so I'm so glad that you mentioned that because that's a great segue, into, the next phase of our conversation because you didn't stop at the boot camp. After you finished up with the boot camp, you came and joined the mastermind and we worked together for another year.
Yeah.
And so what made you decide to continue on in the mastermind after you had, massive success with your book? Because with your book, I believe you made your ROI on the program in like your first month of release.
Yeah, for sure. I made that money back. It was within the first month for sure. And then why I went to the mastermind route was because when the book started to sell, it actually generated a lot of clients for myself. So at that time in 2021, we were just doing as a company just one-on-one coaching. So I was coaching students, and it got to a point where my caseload in terms of client load got so large that I couldn't maintain the client load and still do my job as a professor. I love what I do as a professor. So I wanted to do both. And there was no way one-on-one I could work with as many clients. And so I wanted to develop a group model. And so I joined the mastermind to help me develop the group model and then learn how to kind of package it and then sell the model. And so what became the Velocity Coaching Program started from working with you in the mastermind.
Yeah, and we had a good time together in the mastermind as well. I'm so glad that you that you shared that you were working one-on-one with clients, and even before doing this, that you already had some type of brand. So after writing your book, and then we're going to talk about the mastermind a little bit more, but after writing your book and then starting to work with clients in a different way, how did that expand your brand? Because you were already doing some work, but did that amplify, the work that you were doing in any way?
Yeah, the book helped position me in a particular way in terms of our company because Done Dissertation, we have a very unique niche. And so it kind of helped us become like a leader in the niche, if you will. So it was a combination of the book and then what I learned from marketing the book in terms of doing content via social media, doing lives about the book topics. I started doing this in 2020, but from the book, I started going live each week. But since I've done that 4 years straight, going live every week on content related to what we do as a company. So like when you add the book plus the content, it puts it everywhere so that students see the content, but actually professors see our content and give it to their students. So now we have this whole cycle now that faculty send their students send their fellow students. So it's just continuous cycle.
Awesome. Like just the way that you have laid out that whole entire process, I think is phenomenal. And so let's talk about this coaching for a minute,
Yeah.
because when we first started in the mastermind, you were like, yeah, I work with some clients one-on-one, but I can't take any more
No, I can't do it
one-on-ones.
anymore. I was getting burnt out. It's the pandemic. I'm home trying to work, little ones at home. It's just a lot. And I was like, I can't maintain this long term.
And so one of the first things I had you to do was to increase your rates.
Yep.
And I, if I remember correctly, I said, take everyone that's one-on-one with you and have a conversation with them and put them in a group. What was that process like for you?
Yeah, so I had a couple people around that time when you told me to do that as a strategy. A couple people were not as interested, right? But I said, well, then this is the price, and then some said yes, and they just went up to another price, and that was fine. So I kept a couple people one on one, but then what anybody knew or anybody that reached out at that point was like, it's group only, and this group will start. And I gave myself a little bit of time out to try to sell the group model. But yeah, I had conversations with people. Some people were cool with this, some people weren't. But if they didn't want to go to the group route and they want to stay one-on-one, the cost had to go up just because, I needed my time back.
Awesome, awesome. And so when you were transitioning and
Mhm.
learning how to sell in a different way and launch, what did you do? Like, what was that process for you?
Yeah. So once I figured out and I kind of had a initial structure for the curriculum and how I wanted to look, I just had to put it together and then start offering marketing it. So that it became more of a marketing situation than actual anything else. And so what I initially did was there were doctoral Facebook groups. There are plenty of them. And I would go in and say, hey, I'm going to do a free training for you all on a particular topic related to the dissertation in effort. So at the end of my training, that it would be, if you're interested in doing more and want support on your dissertation, we can schedule a time and fill out the application to join our, consider our program. And so I was able to do these free workshops. And I ran those every week. So I would do it once a week, every week in these groups. And then that's how I initially took on the first, probably like 5 to 10 clients in our group cohort.
And when you increase your rates and you offered group and one-on-one, did you see a decrease or an increase in sales?
Definitely increased when we went to the group, but this is interesting how things work. So I had one client in particular who reached out to me in like 2018. At the time, the most that they could purchase from me was like $1,000, I think. They said no in 2018. In 2021, when we had the group program running, that same person had not finished yet and came back around, and the cost was 5 times that, and they joined then, and they did finish. But it just gets to a point where they had an opportunity, but sometimes if you don't see the value at that point in time and the problem isn't as urgent enough, sometimes you don't make a move. But that's been recognized. Like, I've been stuck for 3 years. And
Right.
then they joined and they're like, oh my God. And they finished within like 6 or 7 months. They were done.
The power of getting help. I'm telling you, like, you can struggle on your own unnecessarily for
Yeah.
a long time, or get the help that you need and accelerate your process, your progress in record time. And so your first launch,
Yeah.
because I think you launched a few times
Yeah.
while you were in the mastermind.
Yeah.
How did your first launch go?
Yeah. I think the first launch was like maybe 30K, 40K, somewhere around there, like 30K, 40K. And then I was like, let me figure out and try to, as the book kept, selling more, getting more folks in and combining with the content, it all started to work together. And then it started from like a 30K launch. Initially, I was just doing these cohorts that ran at only particular times. And then it went from like a 30K to then like a 60K to then 80. And then, one of the last ones before I left was like over 100,000. In terms of a launch. And so it just, we started to, refine the process. And then as more students are going through the model, I'm tweaking the curriculum. I'm getting feedback from them on what are some things we can add. So I started adding other components to the program to make it even more tailored to what students felt like they needed to finish. So it became easier to sell the better the program got.
And what was that like for you? Because at some point, a shift begins to occur. When you go from working one-on-one to
Yeah.
now you're having 30 and 60 and 80 and
Yeah.
$100,000 launches, while you are still holding down a 9 to 5
Sure.
career that you got tenure at. Like, you were a
Yeah.
professor, you
Yeah.
end up getting tenure during that process.
Yep.
So what kind of mindset shifts did you go through to say, listen, like, my business is now doing multiple 6 figures, and I'm making this amount of money over here while I'm still bringing in what I'm bringing in from my 9 to 5. Like, how did you begin to change or transform, or what type of shifts did you have to make?
Yeah, I had to. One is just like your money, your thoughts around money change when your units of what you bring in change. And so like now, I looked at what I was making as a professor, and I had the potential, and at times could make that in 1 month, my whole year's salary. So it's just like when you look at that, opportunities look very different. So you start to figure out, all right, if something's, let's say for instance, let's say someone's making, I don't know, $10,000, 10,000, maybe $100 type of opportunity doesn't seem useful because it's like, is that worth my time when I can go do something that makes 10? So you start to really have different perspectives around money. So that's one of the things that change. And then also recognizing, like, once we started to grow it and I got so many clients finishing, they're all doing their thing. I'm like, the vision starts to become bigger. And I'm like, how do we grow this to where we don't just work with tens of students? How do we work with hundreds or even thousands of students? So now, starts to figure out, like, all right, how do I onboard and start training and developing coaches? Because I can't do this all myself. So that became the next step, is like, how do I bring on coaches? And that's what I ended up doing as our client base grew, to bring on a coach to help support the workload. And so, yeah, you start to figure out resources start to become different. Your perspective on how to do sales is different. Like, I'll sell like once you do it enough, I can sell it. My team jokes with me all the time. Like, I developed this program. I joked with them. I said, I'm gonna sell this. I said, watch. And I do it all the time. Like, I have an idea. I said, let me test it and I'll sell it. And I'll implement and see, is this something I want to grow for the company or not? We just want to keep it, something we do just one time. And so, yeah, that changes too. You just you get more confident in sales.
That's so good. That's so good. And so what was that like for you? Like, with building your business, it's growing, you're getting clients, but not only holding down a career that's growing as well, but you also are a husband and a father.
Yeah, so that definitely makes an impact, for sure. My daughter's, at the time is recording, is 5, and so she was like 2 or 3 as this thing was growing. And so even like the things that she does, she talks about business all the time. She's like, I'll have my she calls herself a seller, and she's like, I have a hot dog, my food stand, I'm a seller. But she's learning that because she hears me talking about that. And then it got to a point where my wife, who was a vice president of a national insurance broker, I was like, Renee, like, you're helping. We're already doing this behind the scenes, but you're behind the scenes doing this work while you're working in your full-time job. Can we transition? Because she's phenomenal. She's better at sales than I am. And so I'm like, you need to be doing this part. Like, you know the sales, the operations, you are the CEO of this thing. Can you come over full-time? And it got to a point where we were able to grow the business. We kind of had a strategic plan for a year to grow the business enough where she could come over full-time, and she runs the show. So Renee is like the CEO of the company and runs it. I'm like the face, but she does all of the logistics, like setting up everything, the infrastructure of the company, everything Renee does. So we're able to make that move. And so she's a full-time entrepreneur. I'm still part-time, in the business, but I'm also working, but she's full-time in it. So that definitely changed as well. And just what we've been able to do, and why we did business in the first place. Like, we wanted to invest in real estate. So it just became an arm for us to build our real estate portfolio, which we've been able to do since, growing the company.
That's amazing. Kudos to y'all. And I love Renee. Hey, Renee. I know you're probably going to listen. Listen, it's so phenomenal. And I know that our listeners as well are just going to be so encouraged and empowered, because especially in the world of education, you don't hear about these things happening often, and with us having the skill sets that we have, with being able to create programs and teach others and help others accomplish their goals. Like, this is what we do day in and day out.
Yep.
And then to basically empower yourself by doing that for yourself, through a company that you own.
Yeah.
And use those revenues to build up other streams of wealth building, whether it's investing, real estate, so on and so forth. It's just very, very encouraging. I'm just so proud of you guys.
Thank you. And I think the other thing for your audience to consider too, right, is like, it's cool to make the money and all, but like, is your product transforming the lives of somebody else if you're going into this for that reason? So like, I've been able at this point help like 110 folks. We're looking at our data, 110 folks go to earn their doctorate. Like, those people now have been able to change their lives as a result. And so that's the ripple effect. I think that's even more important. And that's what sells, honestly. It's like the results. So, it's not just about me talking about the company or program. It's like, look at the clients that we have and what they've been able to do since earning their doctorate. And that's why we feature a lot of our clients in our content to talk about what they've been able to do with their research and stuff. Because I think people need to see it. But I think it's another component of the business. I think folks need to keep in mind, is like, what's the transformation of what you do for the other person.
I mean, and even me, I'm a future client of yours because
Yeah, we want to get
I'm
Jasmine
working
get
on
on
my
the stage.
doctorate at
Yep,
the
we got to
time.
get this thing done.
At the time of this recording, I'm working on my doctorate. Finally got my first year in the books.
Yes,
I
indeed.
got 2 more years to go. My goal is to finish in 2 years. And Dr. Ramon is the one who helped me navigate through the process. It's been like 8 years 7, 8 years since I've been in school. And, he was in the background looking over stuff for me before
Yeah,
I
like, you all right
submitted.
in that test class? You doing all right? Just checking on you. Yeah, I know how it goes.
Yeah, he does still check. I'm not even in the program yet, but he checks on me. Like, listen, how's it going? How's it stats class? Stats almost kicked my entire behind last
I know.
semester. But yeah, I mean, I'm so happy for you guys. All right, so I had a couple more questions
Yeah, sure.
because I know one of the things that you started doing, and I know that one of the things that you're working on now is licensing your program
Mhm,
to colleges and
mhm.
universities. So when you came into the mastermind, you were able to take what you were doing one-on-one with clients and put it into a curriculum-based format
Yep,
that's documented.
yep.
And so how are you now able to go from just offering that as a quote unquote online coaching program to now being able to facilitate that same training in person and even license it? Like, what was that transition like going from the digital online space to in person? And how
Yeah.
did having a curriculum around that help you?
Yeah, initially I didn't envision how the licensing part would work when I first developed the Velocity coaching program. But then I had a university. This is how stuff sometimes works. I had a university that reached out to us to say, "Hey, we want you to support all of our doctoral students." And initially, this university said one-on-one. And I was like, "Okay, I'll hire a bunch of coaches." And I gave them an offer, and they were like, "Ooh, that's a little bit high." And then I happened to talk one of my relatives, my cousin, Dr. Robin Jackson. She's in this space, like does professional development in K-12 space, and she was like, "Well, why don't you package it as a group model for the university, like just like what you do for your group with your clients that work with you? Why don't you do something for the university and package it, and then add a couple other things that make sense for a group model for a large number of people?" And when she said that, I was like, "You're right." And so we did, initially developed what we call back then the university partnership program, and then that became a route for us to then take on doctoral programs to work with them. Now we have it called the Navigator program, where now we're looking at it from a holistic perspective, working with the students at a university, all their students, but also their faculty. So trying to catch both sides of it. And
Mm,
initially, like I said, from that one university, we kind of tested it. I saw that group, that university, it was their first cohort of doctoral students. 90% of them graduated on time.
mm.
And we had worked with them the whole time that they were in there as doctoral students. So, we were part of that reason why those students did so well. And so I was like, we got to be able to package this and do it over and over again. And so it becomes easy once you have the curriculum mapped out. A university or organization might bring you in to teach one component of it. And so, like a lot of universities bring us in to do workshops for students on what we call design your done dissertation. So how do you design a plan to finish the process? That's before they start the writing. And so I go to universities, I do that as like a half-day workshop. That's something we teach within our curriculum. Some folks say, "Hey, I want you to do a workshop on a literature review." So I got a whole workshop just on literature review, but it is also a module in the curriculum, but we expand it for like a half-day workshop. Same thing with methodology. So we take everything that's on our curriculum and expand it. So you have the opportunity, once you create it one time, is to be able to package it differently depending on, your audience.
So you're able to take the same
Yeah.
content from your online coaching program and not deliver the whole thing in person. You're able to take like a lesson
Yep.
and deliver that lesson as its own standalone workshop,
Yes.
right? And I'm breaking this down for our listeners because I think that some people tend to make it more difficult
Yeah.
than it is. I know it's easy for us because we come from this world,
Mhm.
being able to extract and spend things.
Yeah.
But the way that you expand it likely is by incorporating workshop time, implementation time, time for them to work there in the room or whatnot, maybe some activities,
Mhm.
and that's how you might be able to take a 15-minute lesson and turn it into a 60 or 90-minute, or like you say, a half day,
Mhm.
workshop. Now for you,
Yeah.
because we do this in the online space, when we talk about creating a course, we talk about our funnels, right?
Mhm.
And so what I hear you saying is that it kind of works the same way in the college space. You go in to do a workshop, and then from the workshop, what happens?
Yeah, from the workshop, depending usually how it's set up, and this is something I learned in the masterminds is that you have to have some way to capture information, right? And so I think that's big. One of the biggest mistakes people in the college space make, particularly college professors. I try to tell folks they don't listen to me, so I just let's say forget it, y'all figure it out later. But you do these talks, right? And then you leave the talk, people are excited, they may get your book, but then what? Nothing happens after that because you had no way to get their information. So at the end of any conversation that I have in a college space or wherever I'm doing a workshop or presentation, at the end, I'm definitely going to give them either some type of lead magnet or maybe right now I have a training called Elevate Your Academic Writing. And so if imagine this was the space, I would say at the end of the training, hey, if you actually want this workshop in a recorded format, just text hashtag elevate to 301-701-2466. You do that on your phone. You can text it right now, folks are listening. You text it. You will get a link to download this training. Now I have your information that I can talk to you and market to you and give you other information, other details later on from that presentation. So typically when I leave a room, I'm probably going to get at least like 60% of the audience's information I
Mm.
leave because especially if they're interested in what you do, you want to be able to capture it. So that's always a piece. So then it becomes the workshop becomes a big part of your funnel. And then there we're going to capture information for those folks and continue to nurture and support. And at some point, those people trickle down and they become clients.
And does the standalone workshop at the university sometimes serve as the lead magnet for you to potentially get a partnership with that school?
Correct. Yeah. So sometimes I have to, especially if they don't know us. I do, and I'll do this sometimes. They'll say, "Oh, we want to see kind of how things go with the students." Sure, I'll do a workshop. I mean, I'll do a virtual one, and sometimes I'll just do it for free. Like I'll do a hour long workshop. You see what happens in action. The students are going to rave about it. I'll get the information. I'll get testimonials for you all, and then I come back to the university and say, "Hey, this is what's happened for your students. Here's how they really valued and learned from this. What can we do next?" I literally just had this happen with a university 2 months ago. I didn't like maybe in February. And then now we're like, oh, we want you to do a whole year-long partnership with us just from that one
Mm.
presentation. So yeah, it's definitely a way to work with the organization as well as the individual if your business is structured in that way.
And for someone who, like, let's say they're not necessarily, because most, you have a very specific
Yeah.
niche. Most people are not helping people to write their dissertations,
Hmm.
right? So say it's someone that has a lot to offer, but maybe they're not in academia. Do you think that this process is possible for them as well?
Yes, it is. I would say, and I deal with folks like this a lot because people have been coming up to us asking us like about how to, do this part. One thing is like, how do you position your work in relation to the priorities of a university setting, right? And so it's no longer about, let's say, for instance, someone's area of expertise was, I don't know, helping the mental health of Black women. Let's say that was your space. You can go at it like that, but if you're trying to the university context, they care about retention, attrition. Those are the big pieces. So now you have to frame it like I help the universities help you retain your black women students by way of mental health support. Now that's a whole different type of lens. So you just have to learn how to talk about what you do in the terms that the organization uses and that they value. And universities become easy. On their websites, they publish their mission statement, their vision statement. They even have a document called their strategic plan. Go to that document and see what their 3 and 5 year strategic plan is, and now you just tie everything right to their plan.
Listen, Dr. Ramon just laid it out for you.
Yeah.
Like, honestly, in the past 40 minutes, this podcast episode is an entire course in itself. All you have to do if you're listening is go back and listen to it and write down everything and then go implement.
Promise
Implement.
you.
Like, you should be able to make 6 or multiple 6 figures from this information alone
Yeah.
if you just go and execute. Like, he just told you how to do it, and he works at a school.
I promise you, it's on their website. The 99% of them will have it somewhere on the about page, mission, vision, and then somewhere you might have to Google it, strategic plan. They got it. They have to
And
do. They have to do it.
it's so important because, and I'm so glad that you mentioned that, because when it comes to writing books, I find that people too often get caught up in what they want to write instead of focusing on what people need or
Mhm.
what's needed or how you can solve a problem. And when you write your book based on what you want to write, you're literally cutting off your revenue streams.
Yeah.
Focus instead of focusing on, writing a book that's going to help solve a specific problem. And then you position yourself to be able to spin it or align what you do to other people's missions, visions, and desired outcomes. And then you can swoop in and say, okay, you know what? This is what I do, and this is how I can help you.
And let me
You
give you an
know?
example of like real time of how this happened, right? So, we have been working with students for years, and we become very good at helping students. And then I kept getting initially, maybe like 2 or 3 years ago, I thought about, well, maybe I should do something for faculty. But back then, when I tried to position it, they didn't want to hear it at the time. But then all of a sudden this year, I started to get more and more faculty saying, hey, or department chairs and deans saying, hey, we need something for the faculty as well. I want to help them as well. I was like, maybe I'll think about it. And then I got a national government agency that came to us and was like, do you do stuff? I know we know that you do stuff for students, but do you do stuff for faculty? And I was like, all right, I got to write this book. And so
Mhm.
that's literally why I'm writing this book right now. It'll come out sometime in fall of 2024, most likely around dissertation chairing, because we knew that was another component. But that just happened from hearing what people needed. And my own faculty members at my university were saying, hey, I see how you are chairing your students and you have a particular way of how this process goes at the university, and you get students in and out of here. I want to learn what you're doing. And so all that stuff combines, like, all right, I'll write the book now. So that's a response to what people are asking for versus, me thinking it was a good time to do it.
Yes, I love it. I love it.
Yeah.
And one of the reasons why I love it is because I know a few years ago you were considering, launching a program to teach doctoral students how to, you make money or capitalize off of their doctoral degrees. And you never moved on it. And
Mhm.
now I see you going in this direction that you've already tested, and you know that there's a market for this. And it's going to be an easy lift, and you already know that you're going to be selling in bulk and going in to do additional trainings on the back
Yep.
end. Like, even me, I'm in a doctoral program. I am going to recommend this book to our chair, to my
Yep. That's
chair,
exactly
and
what I'm gonna
to
go through my whole
those.
student. That's exactly I'm gonna do
But
that.
right, like, I'm gonna recommend, when you finish this book, I'm gonna recommend this book to my chair and to the other staff, of the program, because I know that they can use it. So then
Yeah.
you have people doing your marketing for you.
Yes. Yes, indeed.
All
Yeah.
right, Dr. Ramon. We know we can chop it up all
Yeah, for sure.
day. And so I just appreciate you taking the time to come on and share with our community about your experience,
Yeah, no
and
problem.
also sharing the gems that you have implemented and learned along the way. So please tell everybody how they can get in contact with you.
Yeah, if you're a doctoral student in need of support, please, we have a training called Elevate Your Academic Writing, and you can get access to that. You can text hashtag Elevate to 301-701-2466. And then online, our website is www.thedonedissertation.com. And if you type in Done Dissertation anywhere online, you will find our content. We have a lot on our YouTube channel. So if you're like stuck in the process, go to YouTube, type in Done Dissertation. You'll see our page. We got so much stuff for you related to all aspects of the process. And so definitely start there. And then we'd love to work with you on our programs. And yeah, you can learn more about those on the website as well.
Awesome. And how can people find you on social media?
Yeah, if you just find me at Dr. Ramon Goings on most of the sites. I'm pretty active on LinkedIn, Twitter, Facebook. You can just type in Dr. Ramon Goings, you'll find me on everywhere. And my personal website is www.ramongoings.com.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Dr. Ramon.
Thanks, Jazz. I appreciate you.